The rain had been whispering against our windows all evening, a soft, rhythmic tapping that usually lulled me into a sense of comfort. Our small apartment on the 3rd floor always felt warmer when it rained, like the walls leaned in closer, keeping the outside world at bay. I sat on the couch with a mug of tea cooling between my hands, watching the city lights blur into streaks of gold and white beyond the glass. That's when I realized how quiet the place felt. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, the kind that leaves a hollow space in your chest. He was usually here by now. Every night, like clockwork, my roommate would kick off his shoes by the door, toss his keys into the bowl on the counter, and fill the room with his presence. Even when he said nothing, I could feel him. Tonight, all I could feel was the echo of his absence. I told myself I was just tired, that I wasn't waiting for him. But my eyes kept drifting to the door. My name is Adam, and for the last 6 months, I've shared this place with Jake, the straight guy who somehow turned my quiet life into a constant exercise in self-control. He was easy in a way I wasn't. Loud laughter, careless smiles, a confidence that seemed to spill into every corner of the room. I admired him from a safe distance, tucked away behind jokes and late-night conversations that never went too deep. At least, that's what I thought. The clock on the wall ticked louder with every passing minute. 10:30, 10:45, my phone buzzed, and my heart jumped before I even looked at the screen. Just a notification from a group chat I barely paid attention to. I set the phone down, annoyed at myself for hoping. A strange sound drifted through the apartment then, a soft creak, like a door shifting in a breeze. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The hallway light flickered once, twice, and steadied again. I stood up, my socks whispering against the floor as I moved toward the hallway. "Jake," I called out, my voice sounding smaller than I meant it to. No answer. I paused outside his room, the door slightly ajar. A sliver of darkness inside, the faint scent of his cologne lingering in the air. My mind raced with possibilities I didn't want to name. Where was he, and why did the thought of him being somewhere else, somewhere I wasn't, make my chest tighten? I leaned against the wall, closing my eyes for just a second. This was dangerous territory, feelings I wasn't supposed to have, questions I didn't want answered. But as another creak echoed down the hallway, closer this time, I felt something shift inside me. A sense that whatever normal we had built in this apartment was about to crack. And I couldn't shake the feeling that when Jake finally walked through that door, everything between us would change. Would I be ready for what I might see? The rain had softened into a mist by the time Jake finally walked through the door. I heard his keys first, the familiar jingle that usually made me relax without thinking. Tonight, it did the opposite. My shoulders tensed as if my body knew something my mind refused to admit. "Sorry I'm late," he said, kicking off his shoes and pushing damp hair out of his eyes. His jacket was darker at the shoulders, soaked through. He smelled like cold air and the faintest trace of something unfamiliar, something that didn't belong to our apartment. "It's fine," I replied too quickly, standing from the couch. I wasn't waiting or anything. Quote. He smirked, that crooked half smile that always made my chest feel too tight. "Sure you weren't." He headed for the kitchen, rummaging through the fridge. I leaned against the counter, watching him move around the space like he owned it. Maybe he did. I'd let him take over the quiet, fill it with his laughter and careless energy, until the apartment felt like it revolved around him. "So," I said, trying to sound casual. "Where were you?" He hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. "But I saw it. Out," he replied, grabbing a bottle of water and twisting the cap. "Just stuff," I echoed. He shrugged. "You know, life." I nodded, pretending that was enough. It wasn't. We fell into our usual routine after that. He turned on the TV, flipping through channels without really watching anything. I went back to my tea, now cold and bitter. The rain tapped softly against the windows again, a steady backdrop to the silence growing between us. I kept stealing glances at him. The way his jaw clenched when he focused. The way he stretched his arms over his head, shirt lifting just enough to show a sliver of skin before he tugged it back down. I hated myself for noticing. Hated how easy it was. "You're staring," he said suddenly. I nearly dropped my mug. I am not. He raised an eyebrow. You are. You always do that when you're thinking too hard. I laughed, a little too loud. You don't know what I'm thinking. Don't I? He leaned back on the couch, studying me. You've been weird all night. Maybe you're the weird one, I shot back. Maybe. His gaze softened, something unreadable flickering behind his eyes. Or maybe something's got you on edge. I didn't answer, because he was the something. The night stretched on, heavy and slow. The TV droned in the background, but neither of us paid attention. Eventually, Jake stood up. I'm going to shower, he said. Okay, I replied, even though my pulse picked up at the word. I listened as he walked down the hallway, the bathroom door closing behind him. A moment later, the water started running. The sound filled the apartment, a steady rush that made everything else feel muted. I told myself to stay where I was, to finish my tea, to check my phone, to do anything except think about the man just a few feet away behind a thin wall. Instead, I found myself standing in the hallway without remembering how I got there. The light from the bathroom spilled out under the door, a thin golden line across the floor. Steam fogged the mirror on the wall. I leaned against it, my reflection blurred and distorted, like I didn't recognize myself anymore. What are you doing? I thought. The water cut off. My heart jumped into my throat. I stepped back, nearly tripping over my own feet as the door handle turned. Jake stepped out, towel slung low around his waist, hair damp and curling at the edges. He stopped short when he saw me. Hey, he said. You okay? Yeah. I lied. I just forgot my phone in my room. He nodded, but he didn't move. We stood there, the hallway suddenly too small for both of us. I could feel the heat coming off him, see the way droplets of water slid down his neck. Adam, he said quietly. The way he said my name made something in my chest ache. Yeah. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Ran a hand through his wet hair, leaving it even messier than before. Never mind, he muttered. He brushed past me, close enough that his shoulder grazed mine. The contact was brief, accidental, or maybe not. Either way, it sent a shock through me that I couldn't ignore. I retreated to my room, heart pounding. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall, trying to steady my breathing. This was getting out of control. I was crossing lines I couldn't uncross. A soft knock sounded at my door. I froze. Adam. Jake's voice came through, low and uncertain. Can I come in? Every instinct screamed at me to say no. Every other part of me wanted to say yes. Yeah, I said after a moment. Sure. The door creaked open. He stood in the doorway, towel replaced by sweatpants and a loose shirt, but somehow that made him look even more real. More human. He leaned against the frame, arms crossed. You've been acting different lately. So have you, I replied. He sighed. Fair. We stood there, words hanging between us, heavy and unspoken. I could feel something building, a pressure in the air that made it hard to breathe. I don't want to mess things up, he said finally. Neither do I said. But, he prompted, but I think something already has. His eyes met mine, searching. For what? I wasn't sure. Answers. Permission. The silence stretched, thick and electric. Outside, the rain started up again, harder this time, pounding against the windows like it was trying to get in. Jake took a step closer. Adam, he said, voice barely above a whisper. My heart hammered in my ears. I didn't move. I didn't know if I could. Tell me to stop, he said. I opened my mouth. No sound came out. He took another step, close enough now that I could see every detail of his face, the faint scar on his chin, the way his eyes darkened when he focused on something. On me. This was the moment. The line in the sand. The point of no return. I swallowed hard. Jake, I said, my voice shaking. What are we doing? He didn't answer. Instead, he reached out, stopping just short of touching me, his hand hovering in the space between us like he was waiting for something. For me, I held my breath, my mind racing with everything that could go wrong. Everything that already had. The rain thundered outside, the apartment felt like it was closing in, and in that suspended moment, I realized nothing about my life would be the same after tonight. But I still didn't know whether I wanted him to step forward, or walk away. His hand stayed suspended between us, trembling just enough for me to notice. I could hear my own heartbeat, loud and frantic, like it was trying to escape my chest. The room felt too warm, the air thick with everything we hadn't said. Jake's eyes flicked to my mouth and back up again, as if he was searching for permission in the smallest movement of my face. "Say something," he whispered. I swallowed. "I don't know what to say." "That's not an answer." "I know." I exhaled slowly, forcing myself to look away for a second. "This isn't who you are. Or who I'm supposed to be to you." He flinched, like I'd struck a nerve. "You don't get to tell me who I am." "I'm not trying to," I said quickly. "I'm just, Jake, you've always been so sure. About everything. About girls, about life, about where you're headed. And I'm the guy who watches from the sidelines and pretends it doesn't hurt." His jaw tightened. "You think I don't hurt?" The question caught me off guard. He took a step back, running both hands through his hair like he was trying to pull the words out of himself. "You think being sure means being comfortable. You think it means not lying awake at night wondering why the things you're supposed to want don't feel like enough." The room went silent. I stared at him, my mind scrambling to keep up. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I've been a mess since the day I moved in here," he said, his voice rising just a little. I told myself it was just stress. New job, new place, new roommate. But then I'd hear you laugh from your room, or see you sitting on this bed with that stupid notebook you're always writing in, and I'd feel this pull I couldn't explain. My chest ached. "Jake." "I didn't want to feel it," he continued. "So I went out. I dated. I tried to drown it out with noise and people and anything that wasn't you." The pieces clicked together. The late nights. The vague answers. The scent on his jacket. "And did it work?" I asked quietly. He shook his head. "Not even close." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and the raw honesty in his eyes made my throat tighten. "I'd come back here and see you on the couch, pretending you weren't waiting. And I'd hate myself for wanting to sit next to you instead of going to my room." My hands curled into fists at my sides. "You don't get to say this now. You don't get to drop this on me and act like it's some kind of confession that fixes everything." "I'm not trying to fix it," he said. "I'm trying to be honest." For once, I turned away, pacing a few steps across the room. My thoughts were a storm: relief, fear, hope, guilt, all crashing into each other. This was everything I'd imagined in my quiet moments and everything I'd been terrified of at the same time. "Honesty doesn't make this easier," I muttered. "I know." He followed me, stopping a few feet away. "But pretending it isn't there is killing me." I leaned against the wall, closing my eyes. "Do you have any idea how long I've been doing that? Pretending." The words came out before I could stop them. "I watch you walk in with that stupid grin and talk about your dates like it's nothing, and I nod along like it doesn't feel like someone's pressing on a bruise I never let heal." His face softened, guilt flickering across it. "Adam, I didn't know. I didn't want you to," I said. "Because if you knew, it would change everything." He stepped closer, slow and careful, like he was approaching something fragile. "Maybe everything needs to change." The space between us felt charged, alive. I could smell the soap from his shower, clean and sharp, grounding me even as my head spun. "This is a bad idea," I whispered. "Probably," he agreed. "But you're still here. So are you." Our eyes locked. For a moment, the world narrowed down to just us, just this room, just this impossible, terrifying, hopeful thing hanging in the air. "I'm scared," I admitted. "Me too." "Of what?" "Of wanting something I can't put back in a box once I open it." My breath hitched. "And if it goes wrong?" "Then it goes wrong," he said softly. "But at least it'll be real." The rain outside picked up, drumming against the window like a heartbeat echoing our own. The light flickered, casting shadows across the walls that stretched and shifted, like they couldn't decide what shape to take. Jake lifted his hand again, slower this time, giving me every chance to stop him. His fingers brushed my knuckles, barely there, a question more than a touch. I didn't pull away. The contact sent a shiver through me, a spark that raced up my arm and settled somewhere deep in my chest. I looked down at our hands, at how they fit together so naturally, and felt a swell of something dangerously close to hope. This doesn't make sense, I said, though my fingers curled around his. Since when has anything important made sense? He replied. He stepped closer, until there was barely any space left between us. I could feel the warmth of him, the steady rise and fall of his breath. My heart pounded so hard I was sure he could hear it. Adam, he murmured. The way he said my name, like it meant something more than just a label, made my vision blur for a second. I lifted my head, meeting his gaze. If we do this, there's no pretending after. No going back to how it was. I know, he said. I don't want to go back. The honesty in his voice was terrifying. I took a shaky breath. Neither do I. The moment stretched, fragile and infinite. He leaned in, stopping just short, his forehead resting lightly against mine. Our breaths mingled, warm and unsteady. For a split second, I thought about all the ways this could fall apart. The looks from friends, the questions, the possibility of losing him entirely if this went wrong. Then I thought about losing this moment without ever knowing what it could have been. I closed the distance. The contact was gentle, hesitant, more a promise than anything else. My world tilted, narrowed, softened. Everything else, the rain, the apartment, the doubts, faded into the background. When we pulled back, we didn't say a word. We just stood there, foreheads touching, hands still intertwined, both of us breathing like we'd just crossed a line we couldn't see but could definitely feel. Jake laughed softly, a sound edged with disbelief. Well, that changes things. I let out a shaky breath that was half a laugh, half a sob. Yeah, it really does. But even as we stood there, wrapped in the aftermath of what we'd just done, a new tension crept in. The kind that didn't come from wanting, but from realizing that wanting was the easy part. The hard part was everything that came next. And as the rain continued to fall outside, relentless and unforgiving, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of a much bigger storm. The room felt different after that. Not louder, not quieter, just altered, like the air itself had learned a new shape and didn't quite know how to hold it yet. Jake stepped back first, running a hand down his face, his breath uneven. I watched every small movement, the way his shoulders rose and fell, the way his fingers flexed like he was grounding himself in something solid. Okay, he said, more to the room than to me. Okay, I nodded, even though I didn't know what I was agreeing to. We stood there for a few seconds longer, neither of us willing to be the first to break whatever fragile thing had formed between us. Then he turned toward the door. I should probably go to my room, he said. The words landed heavier than they should have. Yeah, I replied, probably. He hesitated in the doorway, glancing back at me. This doesn't mean I regret it. I know, I said softly. It doesn't mean I don't, either. I just don't know what it means yet. He gave a small, crooked smile. Story of my life. The door closed behind him with a quiet click. I sank down onto the edge of my bed, my legs suddenly weak. My heart was still racing, my thoughts spinning in too many directions at once. I pressed my palms into my knees, trying to steady myself. What had we just done? The apartment fell into a strange kind of silence, the kind that isn't empty but full of words unsaid, of possibilities hanging in the air like dust motes in a shaft of light. I stared at the wall, at the faint crack running from the corner of the ceiling down toward the window. I'd noticed it 100 times before. Tonight, it felt like a metaphor I didn't ask for. A soft sound came from the other side of the wall. Not a voice, not quite a movement, just enough to let me know he was there. I closed my eyes. I thought about all the little things that had led up to this moment. The late night talks on the couch. The way he'd always save me the last slice of pizza. The way he'd knock on my door when he couldn't sleep, pretending he just wanted to borrow a charger. Had it always been heading here? My phone buzzed in my pocket, startling me. A message from a friend, asking if I wanted to come out tomorrow night. I stared at the screen, suddenly aware of how many people existed outside these walls, outside this bubble Jake and I had been living in. What would they say if they knew? I set the phone down without replying. Minutes passed, maybe more. Time felt slippery, hard to hold onto. Another sound, this time more deliberate. A knock, not on my door, on the front door of the apartment. My heart jumped. I stood up slowly, my body moving before my mind caught up. Through the thin wall, I heard Jake's door open. His footsteps in the hallway. "Did you order something?" he called softly. "No," I answered, my voice tight. We met in the hallway, exchanging a look that mirrored the same question in both our eyes. Who would be here this late? Jake moved toward the door, his hand hovering over the handle for just a moment before he opened it. A woman stood on the other side. She was tall, confident, raincoat slung over one arm, her hair damp from the mist outside. She smiled when she saw Jake, a familiar, easy smile. "Hey," she said, "you weren't answering your phone." Jake froze. I felt like I'd been dropped into cold water. "Lena," he said, his voice careful. Her eyes flicked past him, landing on me. "Oh, hi, you must be the roommate." "Yeah," I managed. "Adam." Quote. She nodded, then looked back at Jake. "So, are you going to invite me in, or am I standing in the hallway all night?" Jake glanced at me, something unreadable in his expression. Guilt, panic, maybe both. "Yeah," he said. "Come in." Lena stepped inside, shaking the rain from her coat. The apartment suddenly felt too small for 3 people. She leaned against the counter like she belonged there, like she'd done this before. I stood by the wall, my chest tight, my mind racing. "This is kind of a surprise," Jake said. She laughed lightly. "You left your jacket at my place. Figured I'd return the favor and bring it to you." She tossed it onto the back of a chair. Silence followed. Thick, awkward. I could feel Jake's tension beside me, like a wire pulled too tight. Lena looked between us, her smile fading just a little, curiosity replacing it. "Did I walk in on something?" she asked. The question hung in the air, sharp and dangerous. Jake opened his mouth. I held my breath, and in that suspended moment, with the rain tapping against the windows and 3 hearts beating in the same small space, I realized whatever we'd started tonight wasn't just ours anymore. It was about to collide with the rest of the world. The next morning arrived without asking if any of us were ready for it. Sunlight slipped through the blinds in thin, golden lines, cutting across the living room floor like quiet accusations. I stood in the kitchen, staring into my coffee as if it might offer answers. It didn't. The apartment felt heavier than it ever had, every familiar corner now charged with the memory of last night. Jake emerged from his room first. He looked tired, not the kind of tired that comes from staying up too late, but the kind that settles behind the eyes when you've been carrying too much inside for too long. He gave me a small nod instead of a smile. "Morning," he said. "Morning," I replied. The word felt fragile between us. Lena's door opened a moment later. She stepped out, hair pulled into a messy knot, Jake's jacket draped over her arm like a quiet claim. She glanced between us, sensing something she couldn't quite name. "So," she said lightly. "Anyone hungry?" Jake's jaw tightened. I was about to head out. "Already?" she asked. "Yeah. Work." I watched the exchange, every unspoken thing humming in the air. The way Jake wouldn't meet my eyes. The way Lena studied his face like she was searching for a crack in a wall he'd suddenly built. "I'll walk you out," she said. They moved toward the door together. I stayed behind, my coffee cooling in my hands, my heart sinking with every step they took. At the door, Jake paused. He looked back at me. Just for a second. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't obvious. But in that glance, I saw everything we hadn't said. Everything we couldn't say. A question without words. A promise without shape. Then the door closed. The sound echoed through the apartment like something final. I sank onto the couch, pressing my fingers into the fabric. I told myself this was what normal looked like. That last night had been a moment, not a turning point. But my chest didn't believe me. Hours passed. Maybe days. Time blurred into a series of half conversations and careful distance. Jake started coming home later again. Lena showed up more often. The 3 of us learned how to share space without touching the truth of it. But sometimes, late at night, I'd hear Jake pacing in his room. Sometimes, I'd find him on the balcony, staring out at the city like he was waiting for something to appear in the dark. Once, our hands brushed as we both reached for the same glass in the kitchen. We froze. He pulled back first. Sorry, he muttered. Yeah, I said. Me too. For what? I wasn't sure. The rain came back a week later, tapping against the windows just like it had that first night. I stood by the glass, watching the streets below blur into reflections and shadows. Behind me, Jake's door opened. He didn't say my name. He didn't have to. I felt him there, close enough to change the air again. Adam, he said finally, his voice low. We can't keep doing this. I turned to face him. Doing what? Pretending nothing happened. The words landed between us, heavy and dangerous. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. He took a step closer. I didn't move. What do you want? I asked. He opened his mouth, and for a moment, I thought he might finally say it. The thunder cracked louder, closer, drowning out his answer before it could reach me. The lights flickered, and in the sudden, fragile darkness, I was left standing there, waiting to find out whether he was about to choose me, or walk away for good. The morning fog clung to the windows like it didn't want to let go of the night. I stood in the kitchen, barefoot on the cold tile, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic waking up outside. Our apartment always felt different at this hour, quieter, softer, like it was holding its breath before the day rushed in and filled every corner with noise and responsibility. This was my favorite time. Or it used to be. Jake's coffee mug sat in the sink, a faint ring of brown at the bottom where he'd forgotten to rinse it out. I stared at it longer than I should have, tracing the edge with my finger like it was some kind of map. Proof that he'd been here. Proof that he'd left. I told myself I wasn't looking for him. But my eyes kept drifting down the hallway toward his room. My name is Adam, and for the last 8 months, I've shared this space with a guy who somehow made ordinary things feel like they carried weight. Jake had a way of filling silence without trying, whistling while he cooked, humming along to songs he didn't know the words to, laughing at his own jokes before anyone else got the chance. This morning, there was none of that. Just the hum, the fog, the quiet. I wrapped my hands around my mug, letting the warmth seep into my palms. Outside, a car horn blared, sharp and sudden, making me jump. My own reflection stared back at me from the dark window, tired eyes, messy hair, a guy who looked like he'd slept but hadn't really rested. Something felt off. Jake was usually up by now, crashing around in the kitchen, stealing my toast, complaining about how early the day was. Today, his door was closed. No light under the frame. No sound. I tried not to read into it. I carried my coffee to the couch, sinking into the same spot I always did. The cushions still held the faint impression of where he liked to sit, legs stretched out, arm thrown over the back like he owned the place. Like he owned the moment. My phone buzzed on the table. A message from a friend asking if I wanted to come out tonight. I didn't open it. I set the phone face down instead, like I could silence more than just the notification. A soft noise drifted down the hallway. Not footsteps. Not a voice. Just a subtle shift, like a door moving or a floorboard settling. My chest tightened. Jake, I called, keeping my tone light, casual. Normal. No answer. I stood up, the apartment suddenly feeling too big and too small at the same time. I took a step toward the hallway, then another, my mind filling the quiet with questions I didn't want to ask. Why wasn't he up? Why did the silence feel like it was waiting for something to happen? I stopped outside his door, my hand hovering in the air, unsure if I was about to knock, or cross a line I couldn't step back from. My heart beat louder in my ears. I told myself this was nothing. Just another morning. Just another moment. But deep down, I felt it, that low, uneasy pull in my chest that whispered this was the calm before something shifted. And as my knuckles brushed the door, I couldn't help wondering. What was I about to find on the other side?